Boston City Council's Committee on Boston's COVID-19 Recovery to order. For the record, my name is Kenzie Bach. I'm the District 8 City Councilor and the Chair of the Boston City Council's Committee on Boston's COVID-19 Recovery. This working session, well, this hearing, my apologies, is being recorded. It's being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. Today's hearing is on Docket 0503, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $349,500,000 in the form of a grant awarded by the United States Department of Treasury to be administered by the City of Boston's Chief Financial Officer, Collector Treasurer from the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund in the Treasury of the United States established by Section 9901 of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, ARPA, and pursuant to the requirements of the ARPA, the grant payment would fund COVID-19 response and recovery efforts and accelerate a Green New Deal for Boston through once-in-a-generation transformative investments that address the systemic health and economic challenges in the areas of affordable housing, economic opportunity and inclusion, behavioral health, climate and mobility, arts and culture, and early childhood. And Docket 0504, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $40 million in the form of a grant awarded by the United States Department of the Treasury to be administered by the City of Boston's Chief Financial Officer, Collector Treasurer from the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund in the Treasury of the United States established by Section 9901 of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, and pursuant to the requirements of the ARPA, grant payment would fund provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue of such state, territory, or tribal government due to the COVID-19 public health emergency relative to revenues collected in the most recent full fiscal year of the state, territory, or tribal government prior to the emergency. Thank you everyone for bearing with me. I'm joined here by my colleagues, Councillor Erin Murphy at large, Councillor Ruth C. Liu-Jen at large, Councillor Julia Mejia at large, Councillor Frank Baker, District 3, Councillor Liz Braden, District 9, and Council President Ed Flynn, District 2. And I think we've also been joined and we'll be joined again shortly by Councillor Tanya Fernandez-Anderson of District 7. Our plan for the day is this. We noticed this as a hearing because I understood there were some folks hoping to testify on ARPA, and I'm going to allow some of that public testimony that's already here and signed up to go right at the beginning right now so that they can continue with their days. And then we will turn to discussing Councillor ARPA proposals. We haven't really had a chance to talk together about this. I've seen things that people have sent in by forms, but this is really about that. So in that sense, it's more of a working session. I did invite the administration, Casey Brock-Wilson from the Office of Strategic Partnerships within ANF, and then Scott Finn, our assistant auditor, to join us for kind of technical assistance type questions. So they'll be on the side and we can bring them up to the mic when folks have questions. But it's mainly an opportunity for councilors to kind of talk to each other about proposals. I want to note we've also been joined by Councillor Michael Flaherty at large, who's also the vice chair of this COVID-19 Recovery Committee and prior chair of it. But before we jump into council proposals, like I said, I want to start by offering opportunity for testimony. So I think I'm going to go first to mix it up and go first to our virtual testimony person. I think Hillary Pizer is here from Massachusetts Affordable Housing Alliance, so I'll ask the team to queue her up on the screen. And then, yeah, Megan, if I can get the list of folks in the chamber, that would be great. And I also just want to note for councilors, this screen is not working today, so Hillary will be on these screens. Just okay, great. Hillary, when you're up, you have the floor.
All right, I'm getting a note that I can't start the video. I've been blocked, so but I am here, so I will go right ahead. Thank you, Chairwoman Bach, and all of the members of the committee for the opportunity to testify today, and especially for, I know you guys have been doing a ton of really great and thoughtful work to make sure that ARPA is spent wisely and with an eye toward equity, and our membership really appreciates that. I'm testifying on behalf of about 5,000 homebuyers who have graduated from MAHA's first-time homebuyer classes over the last couple of years, and really appreciated the opportunity for our members to either start relationships with new counselors or build on our previous relationships as we've campaigned for a major investment in home ownership, and we're really excited that ARPA is going to provide at least $60 million of $106 million. And we really want to continue to work with all of you as the implementation phase unfolds further to make sure that we are maximizing the benefits for every dollar that we spend. So the other two things is just really grateful about the intentional focus on programs that serve home buyers of color and first-generation home buyers in particular. And for many years, MAHA has been really pushing for the lower end of the homeownership income spectrum to be as low as 50% AMI or $45,000 to $50,000 for a household. And so it was really heartening to hear a number of counselors really focused on that as well. Huge percentage of our home buyers fall into that $45,000, $50,000, $55,000, $60,000 incomes, either with one or two incomes in the household. And we are really excited about partnering with you to make sure that that group is served with home ownership and not just rental. At this point, it's not a surprise. There's an urgent need for this ARPA money to actually get flowing. The housing crisis isn't getting any better. It's getting worse and worse. And so we really hope that this money can be approved, that the mayor's budget can be approved, and that we can really continue to work, MAHA, counselors, and the Mayor's Office of Housing and other administration members on the particular implementation of a number of these homeownership initiatives that you all have been talking about. So thank you again for your hard work on this. And if you have any questions or if you are interested in collaborating further with us, you know where to reach me. And thank you again for the opportunity to talk to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Hillary, for joining us. We'll go now to the two folks I have here signed up for in-person public testimony. So first it will be Phil Jones from the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization's Housing Steering Team. And then we'll have Sarah Jimenez from Community Labor United. And then for counselor's reference, those are the three folks who had asked to go ahead, and then we'll go to the rest of the program. Phil from GBIO, you have the floor.
Awesome. Thanks, Chairwoman Bach and members of the committee. It's been a treat to get to meet some of you in person and virtually over the last few months, and I think almost all of you have met with my colleagues on GBIO from our 64-member institutions. I've got this pesky little scorecard here from all the way back in 2021. It's got the names of all sorts of candidates who are no longer here, and we've got we've got winners and closers, as it were, in the room here now, with yeses underneath almost all of your names, which is pretty awesome. So my push here is actually not on any specific area of the ARPA proposal. GBIO's push from Old South Church to Temple Israel to Masjid Al-Quran. Our push is not nitpicking. We love the proposal that's on the table. We love the investment in homeownership. We love bringing public housing into the conversation. And we are ready to see money start getting out the door, especially for these housing investments, which are going to take a long time to spend. And they've got deadlines on them, right? Money's got to start moving. So we hope that you have a productive working session today. We're grateful for the partnership so far, but primarily are interested in seeing the proposal that the mayor and this committee have crafted together put into action. As my friend and GBIO's co-chair, Bern Stanfield at Fourth Presbyterian said in an assembly we had last Thursday, if part of the body is hurting, then the whole body hurts. So whether you're in Alston like myself, or you're in the apartments in Mildred C. Haley, which was really the hurting body part that got us into action around housing at GBIO. The whole thing is better when the city is more equitable, when people's roofs are being fixed, and when people are being shepherded towards home ownership as well. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the engagement so far, and excited to see this thing brought home. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Phil. And then last for now is Sarah Jimenez, Community Labor United, here I think testifying on behalf of the Care That Works Coalition. Sarah, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Bach. Thank you to all the councillors here, and it's great to be here even on such a rainy day. I've really appreciated all the conversations that our coalition has been able to have with you over the last few weeks about the opportunities. Again, my name is Sarah Jimenez. I am here representing the Care That Works Coalition. We are grassroots community groups and labor unions that organize working class parents and childcare workers, including family childcare providers and assistants, family friend and neighbor caregivers, early education teachers, and domestic workers. Our leaders and members of our coalition are Black, Latina, Asian, and white women. And we come with a set of ARPA proposals today that recognize all care work as work and that promote childcare worker equity and empowerment. And as Mayor Wu did, we approached this opportunity with a dual eye towards stabilization and systems change. But we also see some key opportunities to build on the proposals that she forwarded, target those resources more precisely, achieve the more equitable and transformative and systemic changes that all of us here want to see. So we have three categories of interest. First, to continue to provide grants that stabilize the professional workforce. So the mayor has proposed making grants to childcare centers for a variety of purposes, including payments to workers. And we believe that these grants to centers should be only used for the purpose of retaining and hiring workers. And we also believe it will be very important to establish robust criteria for that program to establish eligibility and prioritization, to carefully direct these resources to the high-road childcare centers that serve frontline workers in communities with the highest need. Additionally, in that category, we've really supported the mayor's commitment and the city's commitment to family childcare providers and suggest using a portion of these stabilization funds to expand our city's food justice initiatives, to improve food access for family childcare providers, both for their own household food security and also to address the impact of recent food price inflation on their program operating budgets. In our second category, we'd love to see the workforce development proposals the mayor has forwarded focus in particular on equity and empowerment for workers. So that means looking at peer-to-peer workforce development models, pre-apprenticeship programs and services, and worker cooperatives and shared services cooperatives. So first, for the funding that is directed to workforce development and credentialing programs, we think it's really important for the city to really encourage and uplift the programs that are worker-operated or that incorporate strong peer-to-peer components like mentoring and apprenticeships. We also see the need to target funds specifically to pre-apprenticeship programs and services so that target underrepresented candidates that may face barriers to entering the workforce. So as we improve those jobs, we want to make sure that the most marginalized and informal caregivers can access those jobs, especially family friend and neighbor caregivers who are in already trusted childcare arrangements that are embedded in social networks and neighborhoods at the moment. And finally, I mentioned funding for worker cooperatives. I know most folks here and in the city already appreciate worker cooperatives and all their many benefits. So we'd love to see funding to support the creation of center-based childcare worker cooperatives, as well as domestic worker cooperatives. And as far as we know, neither of these models are active in our state, and at least not in any prominent capacity. And then in addition to worker cooperatives, there is a need for shared services cooperatives that would enable family childcare providers, certified assistants, and informal caregivers to join together, access efficiencies of scale, and reduce cost for themselves. The third bucket is a new proposition to add a small line item to renovate suitable city-owned facilities into childcare centers. So this is another vision that we share with the mayor and expands on a model that we do have here in Boston, which is the BCYF-operated childcare center here in City Hall. And given the expensive real estate and rent in our city, a city-owned facility that can provide rent-free space to a program could help them offer higher worker compensation without raising parent fees too much. And so this could support one of those newly launched worker cooperatives. It could be another city-operated program. It could be a non-standard hour program. But in any case, I think it would be a great way to help stabilize and increase the supply of care in the city. And finally, this last piece is not strictly a budget line item, but it's really important to the success of all the proposals above. Many of you know the distance between an equitable intention and an inequitable outcome can come down to the smallest details of program design and implementation. And so we've been really supportive of WU's administration's practices to engage directly with parents and family childcare providers to inform some of their initiatives already. Whatever the outcome of the ARPA funds, we hope to see the mayor's teams continue and build on this practice by establishing a permanent council of representative workers and parents to contribute to the program design, monitoring, and evaluation of outcome data to ensure that these one-time funds are really made the most of. So that was a lot. Obviously, our partners are really excited about the opportunities, and we look forward to continuing to work with all of you on them. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah, and thanks when Care That Works communicated some of those priorities. I asked them to come and share them with the whole council, and we'll make sure that the council also gets the written form, and I think already the mayor's team is looking at those and working on ways of matching them. All right, great. So that'll close public testimony for now. Anybody who's watching this at home and wants to testify, if you can email megan.kavanagh@boston.gov. I'm about to spell that. It's meghan.kavanagh@boston.gov. And if you email Megan, we will get you on the list if you're watching at home. And if you're here in the chamber and you didn't sign up and you've decided you want to testify, sign up over there in the corner, and we'll take testimony after we finish the counselor portion of this. And before we jump into that, I do have just so people know how this is going to run, I think we'll go they're alphabetical, but I think we'll go in order of arrival just to be fair to folks, and then and have people talk through their proposals, and if colleagues have a question or anything, flag that, and so try to have this session be the session where we all learn about what everybody else is proposing, and then the goal is tomorrow at the working session to talk a little bit more concretely about what we can fit in and sort of make room for inside of the ARPA proposal. But I tried to do as much due diligence and checking in on like ARPA eligibility stuff over the weekend, and so there's a few notes on that front in the packet, and also in a few cases counselors called me with follow-up on their proposals, and so in some places I sort of rewrote your proposal to reflect the conversation we'd had in person, but yeah, hopefully people feel like these convey what they were trying to say, and if I change something that's not what you meant, feel free to say. And then we did invite Casey Brock-Wilson over there and Scott Finn, who I mentioned earlier, are both here with us. And so, one of the things that came up in the last similar cycle with the budget amendments was sort of wanting to know from the administration ahead of time that they thought something might not work instead of finding it out after the fact. So if folks have questions for them today that they can answer on the spot, we'll have them answer, come to the mic. If they can't answer on the spot, we'll be asking them to come and speak to it tomorrow. Before I go to Councillor, we've been joined by Councillor Gabriela Coletta, District 1. I should note, Councillor Fernandez-Anderson, that I announced you before you came in. But I do have a statement that the IGR team sent over that I said I would read into the record about sort of the nature of proposals that the administration thinks make sense for ARPA, so I'm going to just read that into the record. In shaping the administration's ARPA proposal, the city intends to make transformative investments in several key areas, including affordable housing, economic inclusion, and childcare. Many, perhaps all of these ARPA initiatives will include grants or contracts to local service providers and businesses. However, to maximize the impact of the dollars to lay the foundation for growth in key areas, we have determined that we will not be supporting one-time capital investments in private organizations. Many city organizations have worthy and policy-aligned capital plans. We will ensure that across all programs, organizations that hope to partner with the city will have the opportunity to engage. We are focused on growing our public programs and infrastructure to show how government can do great things for the city. So they had communicated that view about about sort of not doing one-time private infrastructure to me, and I asked them to send it to us in writing so that we could read it into the record. So that was that.
Interest, will we get a copy of that
Yes, I'll make sure that that's, I was just trying to find it in my email, Frank, and so, yeah. But yeah, we'll forward it over. All right, and then I think now we'll just jump into talking about proposals. So I'm gonna go in order of arrival, which I'm quite sure was Councillor Murphy first. So actually, why don't we, Erin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll jump right in.
And can you actually, when people go, can you just say which page your proposal starts
Yep, mine
on?
starts on 21,
Okay, great.
near the back there. My first one. So I took the approach to apply and tackle the most urgent issues, including recovery and substance use, workforce advancement, mental health and equity for our youth, housing, and arts and culture. So my little folders here, we have workforce advancement. The first one up was the recovery and social and wellness supports. And the two that I put under that category were Namaste Soba, who we met at that mental health hearing we had a few weeks back. She came, she's from East Boston, does great work. And then also the Phoenix, who I know we all know, and they've come to several of our working sessions or hearings. And Namaste Soba's mission is to aid those recovering from addiction by reconnecting their bodies and minds through complementary yoga and fitness memberships, a practice of self-awareness and wellness-focused community events. They also do a great job with hiring people in the recovery community, because one of the biggest things when you are in the process or on that hard road of finding sobriety, recovery, you need work. So that's another reason they definitely made it to the top of my list. Her work is wonderful, connecting to those who need it most, and also seeing the whole picture there. So they provide a healing ecosystem for people in recovery, which we need to support alongside the medical treatment. And like we were saying at our working session earlier, the crisis at Mass and Cass and the recovery mental health crisis we're having across this city coming out of COVID, even before COVID, we need to throw everything we can at it. And these are programs that I know work. Your mental, physical health is necessary to get stronger while you're trying to find and keep sobriety. So that's my pitch for why I'm supporting, and my justification is as we deal with the wave of mental and behavioral health challenges in the wake of the pandemic, a surge of social and emotionally community supports for people in recovery is also essential. The lead department would be the Boston Public Health Commission, and with the Office of Recovery Services. I don't think I need to say too much about the Phoenix, as I know we all kind of know about it. They're a gym that already works alongside the Office of Recovery Services, and those in the Mass and Cass area. Their only requirement for membership is 48 hours of sobriety, and they also offer that mind-body support. I ended up in arts and culture. I know we spoke, Chair, that maybe it will go under housing because they do have a building in the housing development in South Boston, and have been on the phone this morning with Kate Bennett, and also spoke directly to see where the best option. So I don't have to go too much into that, do I? Because you already...
No, yeah,
you
yes,
understand
absolutely.
that one,
Yeah,
right?
this is basically, just for folks' reference, Spoke has a longstanding agreement to have a site inside the new redeveloped Old Colony development. And the question is basically which phase of that's coming in and whether the timing aligns with ARPA support or not.
And may have a better chance of lining it up with funding through the BHA, which has money in their budget to support these types of programs. The grant for the New Market Business Association. As many of us know, the New Market Business Association helps that area business and residents by inspiring continued growth of business, applying influence on government decisions affecting the area, encouraging increased new market business-to-business interaction, and advocating on behalf of the new market business community. They have multiple corporate and industry partners who have selected potential employees in their recovery program, but because of their transitional status and lack of resources, acquiring the required ID and providing paperwork in a timely manner is a significant impediment. With recovery, timeliness is key. So to paraphrase, many of us know Sue Sullivan, who works down in the New Market business area, and she has many workers who she supports by getting gift cards and others who are helping cleaning up the area and providing them jobs. And many times when she has jobs to offer, the ID and paperwork is not there for them. So hoping this pilot would accelerate ongoing successful partnerships with the Office of Workforce Development, including New Market Bids training program for CDL drivers, which is a high demand, and their cleaning crew training program, which provides opportunities to many people in recovery. So the lead department on this is Workforce Development, partnering with the Boston Public Health Commission, and the designated recipient would be New Market Business Association. And I will continue. And just one last plug for that one, the ARPA funding will build the foundation for this easier onboarding pilot program. And then in future, when the employer company sees the success of this program, we're hoping it will provide the needed funding to continue. Youth Builds, so under the grant for Youth Build Boston, Youth Build provides underserved young people with the support and credentials needed to get that foot in the door to enter the building trade successfully. So the justification is funding would improve day-to-day student support in food insecurity, housing, transportation, work gear, and operational support. It will permanently enhance a system for the provision of services by an organization which is already partnering successfully with the city. This would also come through the Office of Workforce Development, and the partnering agency would be the Economic Opportunity Inclusion Department, and Youth Builds would use this money with the outcome of placing a minimum of 100 young adults into union or private construction companies a year, providing the pathway for architecture internships for 45 BPS students interested in architecture and design at local architecture firms, and provide design to build services to local nonprofit organizations that may not have direct access to design through their community service projects that are led by the youth of Boston. And those are the ones that have made it on the list.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if anyone has any follow-up questions.
Yeah, that was
you
gonna
can
be
definitely-
my question. If anybody has questions, like, we'll do it so that, like, Councilor Murphy ran through all of hers. If people have questions on any of them, raise it now. Councilor Lujan.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy, for your proposals. I'm just wondering if the support for the Phoenix, would that fall under the prohibition that you had spoken about, Councilor Bach, Chair Bach?
So I think what Councilor Murphy referenced in terms of like making the list was that originally what she had sent me was the Phoenix had sent us a proposal around a big $5 million proposal, and I had said what I've heard from the administration is they're not going to be supporting any nonprofit infrastructure builds. And so I think her response was, well, then if we're doing a grants program to support recovery operations, they could be a potential recipient in a sort of smaller operations focused grants thing. Because the administration, a number of their proposals involve partnering with nonprofits. Right. It's not a prohibition on that. Right. It's just the idea that if we're building stuff, they want it to be publicly owned stuff.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, thanks. All right, any other questions for Erin? If not, we'll go to the next person, which is Ruthie.
Awesome. Thank you, Chair Bach. So my proposals, if anyone is following along, begins on page 14, and it starts with number 15, and that's returning citizens housing. And councilors on that are myself, Brian Worrell, and Councilor Brian Worrell and Councilor Kenzie Bach. And we heard here from a hearing that we had about the needs of formerly incarcerated residents and the obstacles they face. We focused that hearing on issues of housing, on issues of access to IDs and access to mental health services, and realizing the needs are really great, from basic needs to long-term needs. Shout out to GBIO. They've been doing incredible work, and a lot of the organizing and the efforts that has pushed us to where we are with the administration regarding supporting the Office of Returning Citizens, and even expanding our capacity to partner with community-based organizations as a result of their steadfast advocacy led by formerly incarcerated folks themselves. This proposal would create a rapid rehousing model for criminal justice involved individuals and families facing homelessness and housing instability that require dedicated supports, including job trainings and placement, primary health care, mental health, wellness, and substance abuse programs. This is a rapid rehousing model that MOH already engages in to a certain extent, and we would want to see it modeled for our returning citizens as well. Justification for ARPA, the pandemic has taught us how impossible it is to access all the necessities of life, especially housing. We know that we need to make sure that we're centering our most vulnerable populations, and oftentimes it's easy for us to forget or to ignore the needs of our formerly incarcerated residents, because they're not at the center of advocacy all of the time because of a lack of accessibility to City Hall. But we want to make sure that we're centering them in our recovery. Many of our folks who were then incarcerated suffered mightily because of the lack of the tight confinement that they experienced while incarcerated and coming home. Oftentimes, housing instability is probably one of the higher reasons for recidivism. And so this proposal would help to solve that problem. Not that we would solve it alone. There's a great organization, Justice for Housing, that has been doing this work, led by the incredible Leslie Cradle, who is a member of the GBIO's Reentry Steering Committee. And so they've been doing a lot of work with BHA to offer housing vouchers to formerly incarcerated individuals, and so we could also talk about expanding that, but we also know that we don't want to use ARPA to support the voucher program. I think this is a great model because MOH already has models for rapid rehousing, and we would just ask them to create dedicated rapid rehousing for our formerly incarcerated individuals in partnership with the Office of Returning Citizens. Not sure if anyone had any questions, but wanted to.
I think, why don't we just, because you have a bunch, why don't we run through them and then take questions all at once?
Yes, I do have a bunch, but I want to put out on the floor just right now that the total of my request is $4.09 million. Second is number 16, temporary supportive housing for migrant populations. This is something that I've talked about a lot. We have a lot of migrants coming to our city, especially from the border, who come here and face a number of issues, housing being, of course, the number one issue for so many of our populations. There's a great organization that's been doing work with Immigrant Family Services Institute. It's called the Immigrant Family Services Institute, and they've been doing a lot of work to house migrants, but it hasn't been enough. They were recently awarded $8 million from the state, but that $8 million comes with a lot of strings, and they've already sort of allocated all of that money, and it's basically run out. So we know that a lot of the economic and political forces that were attendant to the pandemic affected migrants the most, coming from other countries. And, I think that this would be an appropriate use for COVID-19 for the ARPA funds. MOH also has models for temporary supportive housing for migrant populations, so generally for populations, and so I think this would be dedicated support for migrants. Obviously, I'm Haitian American. A lot of the migrants that we're seeing coming from the border are Haitian, and in working in partnership with IFC, when people arrive and there's nowhere to put them, they send them to the hospital for a bed to sleep in, right? And that, we can't allow that. We can't be sending people to hospitals. We can't have people sleeping on office floors. We have the ability to house folks and to lean on the models that we already have, that we've been using down at Mass and Cass, that we've been using in other places to provide temporary supports in the short term for that population. And also just to dispel a myth as well, Immigrant Family Services Institute, a lot of the folks coming from the border are Haitian migrants, but they are not exclusively so. So if you go to IFC, if you go and you observe the migrant crisis, you have folks who are coming from Mexico, folks who are coming from Honduras, folks who are coming just from Central and South America. So this would be, of course, Haitian migrants would be the largest population that that we're serving here, but it's not exclusively so. Just wanted to make sure that's clear for the record. And that request and the request for power is, these are both $1 million pilot programs. Third is theme here. It's around providing support for transitional and supportive housing, is for transgender transitional housing, create permanent supportive housing for transgender and gender non-conforming people experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. Something that's really quite exciting, and I was talking to Councilor Braden about this earlier, is that the Trans Emergency Fund is launching the first house for folks who are transgender and gender nonconforming. It's the first house of its kind in New England it can house 8 folks. Right now there are 3 people in it, and it's being led by Black trans women of color. And I think, even if there are models for us to support work like this, even if it's not in direct partnership, and if it's a set aside from MLH to really be working with the LGBTQ+ community on their housing needs. We are in Pride, and so we need to make sure that we're doing the work of creating an inclusive city for our trans residents. And so that's what this proposal is about, and this is for just short of $1 million, $990,000, which would help them with the housing cost. The theme of these last 3 requests have been for how do we support the most basic need for our most vulnerable populations, which is housing. So pretty simple. And then next is senior active engagement, field trips. So when we're talking about pandemic recovery, a lot of our seniors suffered from isolation and continue to suffer from isolation as a result of the pandemic, which has both health costs, social costs. And so last week and the week before, I went to senior centers, and they talked about they would like to be able to socialize more and to go on field trips outside the city of Boston to be able to explore so that they didn't feel so confined to their buildings. And I spoke with Commissioner Shea over at H-Strong about this proposal, and it's the amount requested is $100,000 to help support the work of H-Strong Commission in providing field trips for our aging residents so that they are able to have fun and socialize in the same way that many of us are able to experience it, but are limited by resources and funds. And then next is BIPOC restaurant, bars, and other related businesses relief fund. We know that during the pandemic, we provided some forms of relief, whether it was through commercial rents or other mechanisms of providing support for our Black-owned businesses, but a lot of them, and not just Black-owned businesses, but a lot of our businesses that lack access to capital continue to struggle when it comes to rent, when it comes to employee retention. And so this request for $1 million would not be to create a new fund, but to support the funds that already exist to help our restaurants and bars in neighborhoods that have not received sufficient help from the city to help make sure that we are giving those restaurants and bars the support that they need through grant allocations. And then I think that's it. Oh, I did have a proposal in here for curb cuts because our seniors and our aging residents also need more curb cuts. I was walking around with, and I know Councilor Baker had, your favorite there over at Keystone. They took me on a walk and showed me how terrible the sidewalks are for them to be able to just walk to things like Walgreens. And it's a complaint that I've heard and that we hear from a number of our elderly residents. We hear from folks in wheelchairs, from folks pushing strollers. We saw that was an issue during the snowstorms that we had here. So we need more curb cuts. And there's a proposal here in the city's own ARPA proposals to make more of a walkable city. Creating more of a walkable city includes more curb cuts. So I think that it fits perfectly under an ARPA request, but I see that it was removed and added to potential capital assets. If I could make a motion for reconsideration, that'd be added here under ARPA, because I think that it is an appropriate ARPA request. And then that's all. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Councilor Lujan. And just a note on that, there were a few things that folks proposed that the administration felt were like more of a capital ask, and there's some finesse around when we're doing physical things with the ARPA money. It's better if they're in qualified census tracts. So obviously curb cuts could be. I think they weren't totally clear on, and I frankly wasn't either from the proposal, on sort of like what was the nuance beyond what had been described in walkable cities. I think if there's a happy to have further conversation about like if there's an aspect that isn't in their 8 million that feels like we want to add back in.
Okay, thank you. And I also failed to mention that I had spoken, sorry, a lot of this came quickly and I wasn't able to consult with a lot of my colleagues, but I did get to speak with Councillor Fananj Anderson and Councillor Worrell regarding the support for Black and brown businesses that are in our neighborhoods that need further support.
Great. Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Louisa? All right.
Councillor Anderson has her blinking light.
Oh, there you go. Councillor Fernandez Anderson, you have the floor. Megan, can we, oh, it's because we have nobody here. 1 second.
Oh, it's on. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councilor Lejeune. I actually wanted to first ask you some questions, Madam Chair, about this format and exactly like realistic or practical approaches to doing this. From looking at this, I mean, I'm sure you emailed this. I'm just looking at this today. Did you email this beforehand?
No, this was still in process as a summary doc. It turned out to be quite challenging to pull everybody's stuff from the forms. So this got finished about 10 minutes before this hearing.
Thank you. And so...
And I know you're familiar with that dynamic, Councillor Fernandez Anderson.
I am. I was trying to extend a little grace in terms of you putting together this report while we all are coming at you. So then there is no specific amount that the administration is saying that there's a limitation, right? Like if we can't appropriate, this is sort of a collaborative effort to get some of our priorities into the ARPA planning.
Yeah, so as we've all discussed, and right, the administration originally made a proposal for the full $349.5 million, right, that's sort of still sitting there. And I know that there's been a lot of council frustration with the fact that we didn't kind of do the collaborative process ahead of time. And obviously I think like there are reasons why it might have been easier to all put proposals out ahead, right, of anything being kind of proposed, but here we are. So I've been certainly hearing as the chair the desire for us to fit councilor proposals into that bucket. And that necessarily means, because of the order of operations, right, like to pull some things out of their proposal. And the reality is that it's very hard to have that conversation without having sort of some substance to councilor proposals on the table. So what I would say is that the administration, the reason we're having this at all is that like the administration is open to finding room for some of our proposals, and the reason they sent that note to me was to like register the fact that they are not interested in collaborating on funding nonprofit infrastructure, but that other things like, we can work together. For folks watching, just so you know, this ARPA appropriation doesn't follow the same sort of ricocheting process as the budget, so the council cannot override the mayor on the ARPA funds, but it does need council passage, so I think we all have to get somewhere collaboratively together. But basically, it became clear that we can't really get to yes collectively without knowing collectively what people are, like councilors are prioritizing and putting some substance on. And we also ended up with a bit of an asymmetry because we actually asked the administration for a fair amount of follow-up on their proposals, and so we have a lot of info on theirs and didn't have as much on councilors, and so that's sort of the thing that we're aiming to even up and then figure out how to combine these two things together.
Thank you. I have suggestions for how to address the amounts for MAHA, or is it GBIO to MAHA, or is it together? That housing component, the report card that the gentleman mentioned today?
I mean, you're welcome to put anything on the record.
So considering that, I mean, we're talking about ARPA dollars, but I want to go on record saying that I did say yes to $100 million towards home ownership to MAHA, and that was it. And then no additional amounts. I said yes to $100 million. But then I'm also okay with evaluating and having them on record to say, how are they going to use metrics to ensure that the $100 million goes to the population that is disproportionately impacted by ARPA, that they execute this properly. So yes, I said yes to supporting something positive, but I also want to go back to that process to hold them accountable before we say yes to that $100 million to MAHA, to ensure, because if they're saying that it's illegal to prioritize Black people for homeownership, but that's what this money is for, then how are we holding them accountable to implement metrics to ensure that this is racially equitable, as the ARPA fund suggests that it should be implemented? The other comments that I have for Councilor Jen, I can't necessarily say, yeah, I support that, or no, I don't support that. I support everything in terms of, like, ideally, I support everything in terms of what you're proposing, but I can't quantify, like, my support. Like, I can't say I support 1 million here, 1 million there, 1 million there, without understanding exactly how much we're working with here. And then if it's an open conversation and we're, like, chipping at it, I think to be really productive in terms of how we get to a collective consensus of some sort, we need to really be realistic and be transparent about what's on the table for us to work with.
Thank you, Councilor Finish-Henderson. The working session tomorrow is more about that kind of trade-off. I think it's hard. I agree with you that it's hard. You have to have those conversations, but also it's hard for people to have those conversations without having a sense of what everybody's proposing. So we're sort of in a two-part thing. And I respectfully, as chair, I'm going to run the process that way. So.
Oh, yes.
So
I'm not
well,
suggesting
I appreciate the input, but yeah.
I'm not suggesting any other process. I welcome your feedback while it's my turn to speak. Thank you. I'm not suggesting any other process. I'm saying that for me personally, if it's okay with you, Madam Chair, that I express what I think, what I feel, what I think it makes sense, that it's hard for me to have that conversation. So, Councilor Lujan, I guess I'll address you directly. In my opinion, it's hard to have that conversation unless I'm looking at numbers. So I support, for the record, since we're doing this, I support returning citizens in housing.
I'll just say, Councilor
Is it okay if I finish my sentence, please?
Yes, but I just say I'm not seeking straw polls right now, so you don't have to feel compelled.
Oh, I don't feel compelled.
Okay.
But is it okay if I share?
Yes.
Is it okay if I share without being interrupted? I think I support returning citizens housing, and I support Office of Returning Citizens. I support the migrant population. I support LGBTQ trans resistant housing. I support pretty much everything that you're saying, even the senior active engagement, and definitely, you know, that I support restaurant, bars, and other related relief fund. I just wonder though, like, how much do we have to, like, break down to, like, all of these ideas? And so I can't say how much of it I supported. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Finish-Henderson. Councilor Mejia?
Thank you. Thank you. I have learned a lot in the last 72 hours about what this looks like and how we can get victory. And are my people from the administration still here, especially the lady? There we go.
Casey.
I'm glad you're here. Casey, it's good to see you. Good afternoon. You know, it's funny because I really do appreciate the question in regards to what is at play and how much we have. I'm trying to be one of those kids that have 13 siblings, and I'm not trying to be real greedy. So I've been really mindful about the things that I'm asking for. Super, super mindful, knowing that I'm not getting everything that I want, even in the operating budget. So I feel like very frustrated with all of this. It's because it is what it is. So when ARPA is coming around, I see that as my restorative justice moment. But then when I hear, you know, what is being presented, And the amount that I have asked for, it was under some assumption that, that we had a limited amount of dollars to work with. And had I known that we were going to be able to have the full candy store, I would have invaded it all. And would have not acted like I was on food stamps right now, which is what I'm feeling like in terms of the things that I've advocated for. I did so with being super mindful of the limitations. So I don't know how comfortable I feel with just a little bit that I've asked for, because I wanted to be mindful of the process. But if the process has been opened up to be bigger than what the dollar amount is, then I'd like to have some more time to ask for other things that I would like to advocate for. So I just need some clarity, because I'm curious about, I tried to stay within the parameters of what I understood we had to work with, but it seems like we could have asked.
Counselor.
So I'm just curious. I just need to know what's going on.
So I think that, like, what you're asking me, if I read between the lines, is Councilor Louis-Jean just presented north of $4 million worth of proposals. Do I think that we have 4 times 13, $52 million worth of stuff that we could pull out of the administration's proposal and replace with council proposals? I don't. I mean, we have $200 million worth of housing stuff, which I think, regardless of people's views about the specifics within it, I think most councilors are politically committed to, right? So you're really talking about 150 and moving things within that. So I think the thing that I would caution people on is, first of all, that I think that councilors are within their rights to file proposals thinking about where we're likely to land, and they're also within their rights to just file all the proposals that they want to, right? And also I would say that there's also a difference, I think, between, in some cases, proposals that fall under an existing administration category and don't really require taking something away. So an example would be Councilor Louis-Jean is proposing that we use AOP dollars to help the trans emergency fund, right, with this house acquisition that they have an opportunity for. There's obviously a difference between whether that is whether that's additional funding to that housing program or that's under that umbrella. So I think that it's certainly my goal as chair, and I was thinking that we would talk about this more in the working session tomorrow, to have everybody feel like we did this equitably in a way that's fair to councilors and to the districts and everything. But I didn't, like, the annotations I added were based on, some feedback from the admin and then this capital thing, but I didn't just like pull people's stuff out, like, or cut it down if that was what they proposed.
Yeah, okay, so I thank you, Councilor Bach. I appreciate the clarity. I thought that for me, when I entered this journey, it was with the understanding that we had a limited amount to work with, so I respected that process, and I just feel like, oh man, I should have not done that. But I'm here, and I'm just gonna have to work with what I have. You live and you learn. And that's that. And that's what happens that's just what happens.
Councilor Mejia, are there any other questions? Or I see Councilor Louis-Jean's light is on. Councilor Louis-Jean?
Just wanted to clarify that, to me, I wasn't functioning under the idea or perception that there was any threshold or, what does the community need? We have this one-time recovery money to do it. And I understand that everything is a negotiation, so these are dollars and they're subject to negotiation. That's what we do. And so these are dollars amount that I know that I singularly am not the city council, that we are a body of 13, and we will discuss everyone's proposals and see what makes the most sense for everyone. I did want to respond to, and I think that's actually also a response to what Councilor Fernanda Anderson was saying, right? That, like, she agrees in principle with these ideas, but can't commit to the dollar amounts, which, I think, to be fair, we got this document, you fill it out, and it said, even if the dollar amounts are uncertain. And so, not going to shortchange the communities that have been asking for the things that they need, but wanted to make sure that we got everything that has been brought to my office, into a lot of our offices on the table so that we can discuss them for ARPA. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lujan. If there's no further questions, the next person up is Councilor Mejia.
Thank you. I don't know, maybe everybody got different memos, but my memo was different. But that's okay. That's why I am the oddball in the family. All right, so I guess I'll just start with, where am I? What page?
Page 18, I think, number 20.
18? Page 20? I mean,
No,
18.
page 18, number 20.
Yep. So we're just asking for support for technical and staff capacity for immigrant-owned businesses. If we know anything about the impact that COVID has had, that a lot of our immigrant businesses have suffered. Specifically, a lot of it is because of language access and being able to navigate city services. So we're proposing just $200,000 to do an equity study to just get a handle on what immigrant folk need. And then, $150,000 to have some staffing to support and to help navigate city services and to build a coalition, if you will, to inform the city on how they can better support immigrant businesses. And yeah, that's that. And then we're asking for that the total is $350,000. And that is just because we've done extensive work with immigrant businesses across the city of Boston, and they have amplified the need for something that is not just about minority business women, but that it really focuses on their specific issues that they've encountered here. So that's it. Then we have housing stipends for municipal employees. This is the vein of everyone's existence here. I keep talking about it. And I'm gonna keep talking about it because we have a lot of low-wage workers that work for the city of Boston, and we have imposed a job residency on many of them. And so I think we have an opportunity to explore what that would look like if we can support our most vulnerable workers. And I really want to give a shout out to Councilor Bach because we were on the phone until 11 o'clock at night on a Friday night, which goes to show that we have no life. Because we were trying to figure out how do we really address this issue in a way that is going to help our city employees. And so we came up to some conversation and a pathway to what we believe could be a way to help support our most vulnerable city employees with a $500,000 investment. And we hope that this is just a model that we can build and maybe through our public hearings and through our continued advocacy, be able to build the infrastructure to set this up for long-term success. And that will be new funding. The other is I'm really encouraged by the Ways and Means Chair, who is committed to supporting our youth development network. I've been talking about the fact that we talk about these students who are chronically absent, and while people think that that's BPS, but this is a department that's specifically designed through the Boston Public Health Commission. They're the least paid, and they have the highest caseload. And we expect, and they're making, some of them, we have a job vacancy that we haven't been able to fill for the last 6 months. You expect them to have a bachelor's degree, and they're getting paid $40,000, if that, and you expect them to live here in the city of Boston. And there's some folks who have been working for the Youth Development Network for over 13 years and are only making $56,000 a year. That is an opportunity for us to fix. And we believe through the chair's leadership and Ways and Means that we might be able to close that gap, or through ARPA, being able to make an investment of only $300,000 for the next 2 years to help support these folks who are literally doing God's work. So that is the investment for the Youth Development Network, and that will go under the Boston Public Health Commission. They already came in front of us, so they're already doing some work around this. They should just need to just invest in this. Then we,
Councilor Mejia, I know
that's
that.
it?
I know
Oh,
that
you took some things away from
no,
me
you-
too?
No, you raised with me this morning that you wanted to land on the Care That Works thing.
Yes.
We just didn't have time to literally write that up.
Okay, 'cause I
But
was
if you
about to
wanted
say-
If you want to talk about that. There's a couple of you who raised things with me in the last 3 hours that I did not have time to write down. So if you have those things, feel free to put them on the record for everybody.
I was gonna say, I got things removed out of my little bucket. I was about to be a baby right now and cry about that too, because that's what I do. Yes, so I would like to go on the record and advocate for an additional $1 million. Now that we're being asked for more, I'm just gonna ask for more. How about that? I'd like to propose that we invest in Care That Works, specifically for folks who are third shift workers or first shift workers. These are folks who have to be at work at 5 o'clock in the morning but don't have childcare, or people who have to work late at night and don't have childcare. And so we would love to have an investment made on these on the childcare providers that are offering opening their doors earlier or keeping their doors closed later to support this workforce. So I'd like to go on the record and asking for $1 million, just because I figured the other ones that I didn't ask for more, I might as well end with a bang and ask for $1 million for that. And if I'm lucky, I'll get $200. But I was there, I feel like, did you delete some things from my list? Because I feel like there were other things.
No, Councilor Mejia, I think that at one point we were discussing the housing stipends for 19 to 24-year-olds that I think that you and Councilor Anderson were also discussing in Ways and
Yeah,
Means.
so I want to go on the record just in case. Could
Okay.
I just go on the record
Yes,
just in case?
absolutely.
Because I deeply care about 19 to 24-year-olds who are transitioning out of DYS, DCF. I want to make sure that we have at least $500,000 earmarked for housing supports for 19 to 24-year-olds, because this is a population that usually gets left out of housing conversations, and we have an opportunity to really address this through supporting our 19 to 24-year-olds. And so housing stipends to support this demographic is something that I'd like to see in the housing bucket. I'm thinking that this could probably be something that falls under housing returning citizens, and we want to focus on young people who are transitioning out of DYS, if it's within some of the advocacy that Councilor Louisiane has been doing. But I do believe that when we think about housing, 19 to 24-year-olds that usually fall through the cracks, and I would like to go on record that either through ARPA, $500,000, or through our operating budget. But Casey, I just want you to know, shouting you out just in case, and Chantal, that I definitely would like to see that investment come through one of these means of advocacy. As I still have the floor, just wanted to amplify that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilor Mejia. Any questions for Councilor Mejia? Councilor Louisiane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a question. I just also want to go on record as supporting the Care That Works Coalition and request to support the work that they're doing and making sure that we're providing for housing, workforce development options. I was encouraged to hear that they've been having hopefully good and meaningful conversations with the mayor regarding, uplifting the need for childcare especially in our informal network. So just want to go on record as saying that. And also to just add that a lot of the proposals, the mayor submitted her ARPA proposals, and there are a lot of, I'll just say, my proposals, other proposals that could fit nicely and squarely within what has already been offered by the administration with specific carve-outs that may require advocacy to do so, and I think that this is one example of that, and so happy to be in support as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I strongly agree, Councilor Louis-John. I think, for instance, the flag from the Care That Works Coalition that the cooperative work should be eligible for the grants the administration's talking about is an example of that. Any other questions for Councilor Mejia? All right, then Councilor Baker stepped out for a moment, so I'm going to go to Councilor Braden. Councilor Braden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm in support of many of the proposals of my colleagues, but I think the one primary proposal that I have was with regard to the Jackson Man Community Centre. Every time I stand, I seem to talk a lot about the Jackson Man Community Centre. We have only one BCYF community centre in our district, and it's slated to close next summer. And it provides a large range of services and supports in our community. So one proposal I had with regard to ARPA funding was, I don't know if I can find it, if I can find what page it's on.
I think it's page 4, Councilor
Page
Braden.
4, thank you. Is to prepare alternative community programming sites to replace the Jackson Man Community Centre, BCYF. The fact is that right now the centre is co-located in the Jackson Man Elementary School, and when the school closes, the school is actually going to close. The Jackson Man Elementary School is going to close this week, and the Horace Mann School for the Deaf is going to continue in operation at that location until next summer. But once next summer comes, that building will be closed and is going to be probably demolished. So we do need to find other locations for all the services that are provided there. We have adult education, we have recreation, we have pre and post school daycare, we have teen programming, and we have all sorts of, and the other thing it is a vote polling place for 5 precincts in Alston. So I'm proposing an amount of $1 million to really help BCYF find alternative locations and prepare alternative locations for picking up the ball when this centre closes. One particular item, really one thing I've thought about, is to invest significant funds into the Brighton High School auditorium or other nearby community facilities to create replacement space for all the community and performance events that happen at the Jackson Man. And if we don't prepare, we should prepare to fail. I think this is really important. I also want to voice my, I know I'll speak to it when it comes up, but the idea of many of the other proposals, I will speak to them as they come up in support of my colleagues. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you so much, Councilor Braden. Councilor Baker's back, so I'll go to Councilor Baker.
If I have any questions?
Sorry, actually, before you go, does anyone have any questions for Councilor Braden about the Alston-Brighton proposal? Okay, seeing none. So then, Councilor Baker, I think the only proposal from you in here is the field house.
Was the field house, and we had the hearing on it. I think people know what it is, where it is. It's in a qualified census tract. It's at Columbia Point, where people know the history of Columbia Point. The city put 5,000 families down in Columbia Point in the early 50s with no resources around them for years. Still very few resources down there. UMass is down there kind of on an island on their own. We have the Dever and the McCormick there, which this field house is trying to ideally, I believe, connect into both of those schools and make that a real hub model down there. Hub model in my head is total wraparound services for the school community, which would be breakfast in the morning, would be places to exercise throughout the school day, would be help with homework and also feeding at the end of the night, which is what the Boys and Girls Club of Dorchester does now. We reach, I believe it touches a lot of the interest points that we're looking for in ARPA, even though the opening letter that you read seemed like it should have been addressed to me, dear Council Baker, we're not going to give any money for capital plans. That's what it felt like and sounded like. But on top of the indoor fields and the basketball courts and the outdoor basketball courts, there'll be kitchens there that people can, that kids can train how to cook, how to feed themselves, food insecurity. There'll be learning spaces there for music and expression. There'll be what do they call them? The rooms, the sensory rooms, because this is also about kids that don't have access to athletics and don't have access to buildings like this. There will be programming in there for kids that have those disabilities. And I think it speaks to what I've been saying from the beginning, that all this money here that's all laid out, millions and millions of dollars, I really don't, and I believe that we're not going to be able to point at anything when it's all done. In 5 years down the line, all this money's gone, programming we're not able to afford it. We're more fare-free bus lines here in this proposal here. That's a liability for us in 3 years. The $8 million that already went is a liability for us in 3 years. We have upwards of $36 million going to low threshold housing. There's a saying in the program AA, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So we're going to allow people who use drugs into these low threshold housings, to allow them to continue to shoot, continue to prostitute, continue to do all the things that come with outdoor encampments. It's a drug scene to me. So I'm diametrically opposed to that sort of housing. That doesn't mean I wouldn't say, yeah, that there is some need for that housing. What about the person, the man or the woman that wants to go into housing and not use drugs? That's experiencing the street, or maybe just out of detox. We don't even have that slot for that person. And this 36 million here is talking about Mass and Cass. We've already opened up the low threshold shelter down there, which I believe we've already put 15 million into. So now we're talking $50 million into Mass and Cass. I mean, there's areas here we're talking about exploring additional engagement centers. The engagement center without security is an absolute disaster for that neighborhood down there. So I'd be very interested in where we're looking to site more engagement centers. But again, back to the field house. For me, it's about building something that will generationally be a place of healing and a place of engagement, a place of learning. Also, we have a huge, for years we've been talking about the lack of daycare for people that are out working. This is in walking distance of the Columbia Point housing development, the Mary Ellen McCormick housing development, and a little bit of a long walk, but also the Old Colony development. And those are the people, the women that are living in there, and those are the ones that don't have access to health care. This will also provide a big component that's health care. But for some reason, it's not looked at favorably. And there's been different charges leveled at it, that it's I don't know how it is, but it's been called a racist program. Nobody's really broken that down for me, told me how it's racist. It's going to serve the Boys and Girls Club, I believe, serves 4,000 kids now, primarily black and brown kids, Cape Verdean kids. So, again, feel like I'm on a treadmill. Don't feel like I'm gonna get any satisfaction in this process here. And bringing it back, 10 million for something that's going to be an asset for the entire city moving into the future, and 36 million for low threshold housing, which to me seems like a recipe for a long suicide. You know, when someone is on heroin and fentanyl, they don't have a long lifespan, especially if they're allowed to just continue to do it and continue. There's no, there isn't a need to get off it because you have everything you need. You know, we've got the city providing housing for them. I wish the city would provide me housing, would save me quite a bit a year. I'd be able to stay here. So that's about all I have for proposals is my field house, and I know that for the most part, I think my colleagues support me in this because they can see the value in it. I'm still at a loss here for what we're building. All the housing that's in here, show me where we're building units, because we're gonna give Maha money for first-time home buyers. Every bit of that money is gonna go outside of the city. If not every bit of it, 90% of it's gonna go outside of the city because we don't have the housing stock. We should be putting 200 million into building. Show me where you're building the housing. Show me where, you know, we're using city assets, land, using ARPA money, and also city assets in a sense where we're actually telling developers what we want. We're not saying, well, what do you got? We're saying we want a 50-unit building on this lot right here. And by the way, here's the permits and here's the design already. To eliminate that, I don't know, how long is the process to build 20 units, 30 units? 4 years, 5 years? And we wonder why we don't feel like we're getting in front of this affordable housing or housing for people that we need to help. The process that we've created, the bureaucracy that we've created, it's all just out of control right now. So, field house, 10 million, let's do the city a favor and invest in this. Let's invest in the future for kids in District 3. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you,
And
Councilor.
thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Any questions for Councilor Baker? Seeing none, go now to Councilor Flaherty, and then it'll be Councilor Fernandez-Anderson. Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your work on all of this and pulling everything together, and also thanks to Casey Brock-Wilson from the administration for her stewarding from the administration. Obviously, want to go on record concurring with my colleague with respect to the field house. I don't think he mentioned there was an opportunity for maybe a matching funds, maybe from the state. If the city steps up,
Yeah.
then the state will also step up. State's waiting for the city to step up before they commit and pledge their portion of it. So I think there's a missed opportunity there. But as he mentioned, it's going to be servicing some of our most vulnerable residents, particularly those in close proximity and local public housing areas, as well as the tremendous partnership opportunities with UMass and BC High. It's just the sky's the limit with respect to this field house potential and opportunity. So I would concur, and please add my name and I'll continue to advocate alongside my colleague for it. I think it's exactly what these funds were created for. In addition, Councilor Worrell will go into detail with respect to the BHA partnership. I've signed on, obviously, as a co-sponsor, and as well as Councilor Lara has also done the Taxi Medallion Relief Program, which I've also signed on to. But specifically, I want to talk a little bit about the two that I have here in 8 and 9, which is, one is a citywide STEM early college pathway. We're adding a life science workforce development piece to it. And again, something that's clearly in the budget in terms of the mayor has submitted a $3 million proposal to support and launch a pilot in temporary external funds, which are the two projects. But as we continue to see our economy sort of polarizing with concentrations of highly skilled, knowledge-based jobs on one end of the spectrum, and obviously clearly the concentration of lower paid service jobs on the other end, and bridging that gap, is, I think, critical for us. And I think that this program and funding for this program would be exactly what, the city needs at this point as we watch ourselves become the city of the very rich and the very poor, having the bridge around opportunities, having the bridge around closing the wealth gap and the achievement gaps, all those gaps that we've talked about. STEM arguably is one of those pathways, and it's also a pathway for underrepresented groups, and I think there's an urgent need in a thriving economy, particularly as we're talking about the South Boston waterfront and all of what Boston has to offer. We're better positioned than a lot of other cities our size and bigger, as we're starting to see a little bit of a pushback or a recession, but we are uniquely positioned because of our colleges, universities, and our hospitals to tap into this opportunity, and it's these pathways through workforce development that will clearly make a difference for all of our residents, and so I'm advocating that we see some additional attention given to that. And the other one is on the behavioral health capacity building and training side of the house. This would be an expansion of the existing proposals to increase capacity for Boston residents that have obviously been confronted with mental and behavioral health needs, but they're not equipped to handle it. So it's only been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. So capacity building and training for the general workforce would enable city employees and community members working directly with Boston residents to better support them. And we've all seen it. Our phones ring regularly across the city with people who work with Boston residents who are being confronted with mental and behavioral health needs, but need additional resources to help deal with it. So there is an existing category of behavioral health capacity building and training, and I'm just asking that we increase those opportunities. And similar to the budget amendments where we were asked to sort of promote something or support something or author something and where we're going to take it from. And I just, through the packet, looking at two areas that I think potentially could take a little bit of a haircut. One is that there's $20 million that's been allocated, I think, for the COVID-19 pandemic, which thankfully we are out of. It's in the rearview mirror. And understanding that there is potential for the thing to sort of swing around, but I don't think at the tune of $20 million at this stage makes the most sense. I could see something in the line of maybe $10 million. That frees up $10 million to put money where our mouths are as a council. We're looking for some additional things to be taken care of ARPA. I think we need to see areas that need to maybe be a little fine-tuned. And the other one, to concur with my colleague, I really think that, from the housing side, you have to demonstrate some level of sobriety. There has to be sort of a threshold of sobriety before we start talking about housing. And to his point, if you have someone that's sober and straight and they're trying to stay sober and straight, but they're either bunked in with or they're across the hallway from someone who is not straight and sober, it tends to make the journey for sobriety more difficult for the individual. It corrupts that process, and I really think that for those that are trying to get on the right track, they're trying to earn their sobriety and their straightness one day at a time off of some very potent substances around fentanyl and heroin, and the list is endless. So I just think that we sort of set ourselves up, or we set those folks up for failure when you have someone literally that's struggling day to day to stay on the right track, and they're next door or across the street or across the hall from someone that's not sort of playing by that sort of the same rules of a threshold of sobriety. I think it's really not the, I don't think it's sort of, it's the investment that we need to be making it to the tune of $16 million. So that's another area that potentially we could identify some cost savings to spread it around to a lot of the things that we're talking about today. So that's my 2 cents on 8 and 9, and just to be recorded in favor of Council Baker's request and the two, Council Morell and Council Lara, who I signed on to. Thank you, Madam Chair. If any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Any questions for Councilor Flaherty? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to Councilor Fernandez-Anderson, and then it'll be Councilor Coletta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make a statement because I really, I'm starting to believe that, what's that word again, when you're an empath? Because I actually do get sort of like set back when I feel I've either hurt someone's feelings or if someone is in their feelings. And I like transparency, and I like for us to build and set example of what it should be in the future. As a Black woman, I do get triggered if I'm policed in how I communicate, in how I express myself. And I'm gonna have to ask you to forgive me in advance if I'm less equipped to next time handle it with less humility. With that being said, I'm asking that I'm allowed, just as my colleagues are allowed, to speak and express myself and my opinion. If there are corrections to be made, I welcome that, but with all courtesy that I show everyone else. Thank you. As far as my ideas are concerned, so I actually clumped it up, and you'll have to forgive me, Madam Chair, that I would love to give you some sort of a budget breakdown of what my ideas are. And I apologize because I do feel your pain in terms of the last minute, like, here you go. But I was busy, and I'm sure you guys know why, and sort of rushed through, and he actually said, I'll explain in the hearing in my form, and did not give a full explanation. So I'm gonna have to say that obviously my recommendations are to go to, yes, I'm gonna sound like my brother Frank Baker, the ARC corridor, and I would like for 1.5 million, if allowed, if it makes sense collectively for us to support each other on our things. I'm open for reductions that we can all make sense out of this. To go to the post-COVID mental health ecosystem pilot program in District 7 that I filed, as well as $150,000 to go to Nubian Holistic Health Center for a study for a health center. We need one, and as we are talking about mass and CAS, Nubian Square, and I know that Councilor Murphy has greatly advocated for the issues with the opioid pandemic in Nubian Square and around, and epidemic, sorry. And I'm thinking that we should do a study, because the community's been advocating on a health center there, but if it's holistic and it's tied to the arts, I think it's alternative to, psych meds and all this other stuff. And so that, and then yes, I would like to still ask for $100,000 for the life insurance study to assess the need for poor people in Boston that need life insurance. So assessing whether or not a program would make sense to support with some sort of transitional program of, financial literacy or portfolio to really get folks understanding what life insurance or how life insurance can really be helpful. And I would also like $500,000 to go to murals in the ARC corridor to be spent over the next 3 years, obviously. And I would like to support, again, my council colleagues that brought up the restaurant and bars and business assistance. Specifically in my district, but open, of course, for all of Boston, but prioritizing BIPOC small businesses that were impacted by COVID, as well as refacing and activating spaces, and also activating art and entertainment for post-COVID. We understand that ARPA funds are also to be used to bring folks outside of their homes after COVID. So that is my total, and Madam Chair, if it's okay with you, I can submit my breakdown of the budget for my proposals before the working session tomorrow.
Councilor French Anderson, that would be great.
Thank you.
Ideally, like soon before, like Like today, not tomorrow morning.
Like at 6 p.m.?
Yeah,
I got you.
That would be great. I would love to have those. Were there any questions for Councillor Fernandez-Anderson? Councillor Lujan.
Just one question. Is the artery part of the request?
It's all of the requests.
Oh,
It's like-
artery is that breakdown?
Yeah, it's like,
Oh, okay.
and then the breakdown. I'd like to submit the breakdown.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And for anybody who missed it, Councillor Fernandez-Anderson had quite a lovely article in the Herald about this yesterday. A thing we don't always say about Herald articles. With love, if you're watching, Sean. Yeah. Okay, no further questions? Yeah. All right. And I just want to say, Councillor Fernandez-Anderson, I'm sorry. You felt policed by me earlier. I think I felt a little bit like you were trying to live critique my chair process, so that was what I was responding to. So, but I think it's always good for us to
I understood.
undo
I accept your
misunderstanding
apology.
of each other's.
I accept your apology.
All right. Now
You're supposed to laugh.
I smiled.
You're laughing. Okay, great.
Councillor Gabriela Coletta, and then it'll be Councillor Brian Morrell from District 4. Councillor Coletta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know, call me the feel-good counselor, but this is the good stuff. Like, reading some of these proposals really provided some light in a very bleak national time, so I just want to center us in that. I mean, the transgender, transitional housing, the STEM grant that Flaherty proposed, and the Chinatown microgrid, like, these are all incredible, and I think that we all should realize that. And I want to thank Madam Chair for your work on this, and Casey and the team sitting over there. Thank you so much for helping us through this. And just kudos to everybody for their creativity and their advocacy. So for me, I will start with, so my priorities were food justice, programming for youth and our seniors, and housing stabilization and protection in East Boston. So we'll start with the food support in District 1. So these are investments in the growing but silent crisis of food insecurity. We all know the pandemic shined a light on the need, and now as we are just getting over the hump, hopefully, of COVID, the lines have not decreased when it comes to food banks, food pantries. Everybody sees this in their district. In my district, I have two incredible organizations who are doing great work, the East Boston Community Soup Kitchen and Harvest on the Vine. And so they need to build their capacity, and this is long-lasting capacity, which is why I think that these funds are appropriate for that use. So this would be personnel for the East Boston Soup Kitchen in East Boston, who they see over 500 individuals every Tuesday. And then Harvest on the Vine is an emergency food pantry that serves 300 Charlestown families every month, and that list is growing. And then before I go further, my council colleague, Councilor at Large Julie Mejia, was a co-sponsor for this, so thank you for your support in this. So that is to the tune of $500,000, and that would go through the Office of Food Justice. And one thing that I have to say too, just because I think this is really important, the East Boston Soup Kitchen doesn't just provide food, they provide menstrual products for women. And when they see that these products are available, they start crying because it is so expensive. So that is a long-term conversation that we need to have. But it's not just food, it's services and these products as well. And then my next proposal is, I've talked about the Nazaro Center all the time, and I just feel like I have to be an advocate for my community. We are falling short when it comes to providing programming for our seniors in the North End. As well as our youth. They go to open gym. There's no sort of, they can learn how to make a charcuterie board if they want, but it's open gym or a charcuterie board. I'll go to that, but I don't know if 15 or 16-year-olds necessarily want to go to that. So we have to invest more money into the seniors and to the kids in the Nazaro Center. Thank you to the board for their advocacy for that, by the way. And that is a modest $25,000 for this year. And then the next proposal that I have is a large one, but I think it's the most important, and I just want to shout out Councilor Lara for her leadership on this as chair of the Housing and Community Development Committee. So this is $1 million that would fund 114 units in East Boston. Right now, so when I watched the ARPA presentation conducted by Chief Dillon, there was a strong emphasis to stabilize and preserve housing in other areas and other neighborhoods of the city, and a little bit of East Boston, but I think the story that just came out from GBH talking about the fact that East Boston home values have soared 227% since 2011, which is the highest of any neighborhood in the city. Right now, we have investors that are salivating at these 114 units. It's going on the international market, so this is a proactive and affirmative action that we could take to protect these units before it's too late. So it would stabilize the East Boston community. It would protect residents against displacement. And Councilor Lara and I have been working on how best to disperse these funds. And the best place for this money to go would be the Neighborhood Housing Trust that the City of Boston runs. They have the legal and administrative oversight. They do this already. And so I feel comfortable about this money going into the NHT. They do this already with the AOP program and could do this in a way where we all feel good about it, where there is accountability and transparency. So this is a $1 million request. I believe it was $500 per counselor for me and Councilor Lara. But this is the much needed influx of cash to preserve this housing before it's too late. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Councilor Coletta, any questions for Councilor Coletta? All right, seeing none, we will go to Councilor Worrell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to my colleagues for all their creative ideas. It's really going to make a true impact here in the city of Boston. My first one is the BHA homeownership partnership. It's creating a city voucher homeownership program through an additional OnePlus Boston assistance, and leveraging the existing city and BHA voucher programs could provide cost assistance, mitigate predatory lending, and expand eligibility, purchase opportunities, and allow 30 years of assistance. So this is like a three-step proposal. So it's the personnel is renovating some of these scattered site portfolios and an increased amount of assistance. And we're asking for $8.1 million for that. And then the other one is housing capacity study for Dorchester Y. Right there on Washington Street, they have a Y that sits on, I believe, over 100,000 square feet of land, and they're looking to build housing on top of it. Right next door to the Y is 102 units, and down the street from the Y at the Common Square Library, they're exploring between like 60 to 75 units of housing. So this is a great opportunity to build housing on top of the Y. We need much needed housing in that area. So this will be a study for home ownership on top of the YMCA. And that's a $500,000 study. And then the other one I have is emergency housing and safety relocation funds. This is for the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute. So family victims of homicide are looking for funds sometimes if they have to move out of that neighborhood. So this would be for moving costs, whether it's first, last, sometimes utility assistance. I'm providing that much needed assistance for families who have experienced homicide. And we're acting for $100,000 for emergency relocation funds. And then revitalization of a park inside of the district right on Mount Hope Street. As we've seen in the budget and the capital plan, District 4 has had the least amount of money in the last 5 years for capital expenditures, and we know that green spaces could be used for healing purposes. And a lot of these spaces have already been created, but the upkeep has been falling to the wayside. So this $500,000 would make sure that we're getting the proper renovation and enhancements to that park on Mount Hope Street. And then last but not least is my Cradle to Career, which is not on here, and it's a $1 million ask to establish a cradle-to-career K-12 data tracking system. We have all seen the importance of data going through this budget process. You know, we're getting as a council a budget analysis team. I think it's very important as a school district we have an education progress analysis team to make sure that we are able to report not only to our students, but to their parents, but also to the general public about how well a student's doing, how well is the school doing, and how well is our district as a whole is doing. So that's $1 million ask to establish a K-12 data tracking system.
Great, thank you so much, Councilor Worrell. And if you're able to send me any further details on that tonight, just, I mean, I know we've discussed it a bit in the hearing and stuff, but just since that one just came through.
I will.
And any questions for Councilor Worrell? Councilor Mejia.
Thank you, Chair Bach. Thank you, Councilor Burrell. I wanted to just, you know, as we all keep talking about housing efforts and affordable housing and opportunities, would like to just seize this moment to underscore an opportunity that we have for workforce development housing. You know, we have educators, we have city employees, all who have job residency requirements, but very little workforce development stock, right? So I think this is an opportunity for us to really think about how do we merge and how do we create opportunities for workforce development housing within these proposals, right? Like even in hearing about MAHA and all of these amazing opportunities that we have to house folks, like how can we do so in ways that are keeping our most vulnerable residents, you know, wrapped in our arms, and as well as housing for young people who are transitioning out of DYS, workforce development housing, whatever the case is. I just feel like, I just want to, like, especially because I am a member of the Y, like, well, I was. I don't want you all looking through my records and be like, she lied, but I was a member of the Y. But I live around the way, right? So I would love to see if we're making investments, how do we keep our city jobs for city people in home ownership opportunities, right? So I just think even if it's just a slither in this report that you're going to be doing, the survey, if there was a slither, maybe 5 units that go towards workforce development housing, I think that is worth considering. Just because I feel like we're always fighting for little crumbs. And if we can just get 5 little units that are for workforce development housing, we would totally appreciate that.
Go ahead, Councilor Worrell.
Councilman Mejia, I'm happy to collaborate, you know, and I think we could be able to do more than just 5. So happy to collaborate with you on this to see what we can make happen on that site if, you know, we are able to get the $500,000 study.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And just one last thing, like I always talk about, I've been on this council for 30 months, 2.5 years, at that, and if what I've learned in the little short time that I've been here is that, you know, if you're on the outside, you're on the outside. So I'm just asking for whatever I can possibly think we might be able to get. So if 5 is the minimum, I will probably get 2. But if you feel hopeful, then we might get 10. But I have very little expectations about what it's like to be on the outside of the game. So I appreciate your enthusiasm and your willingness, but I am also managing my expectations because I know what it's like to be on the outside. But thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Councilor Worrell? Councilor Fernandez-Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councilor Rowe, for your very innovative and thoughtful ideas. I really appreciate the last 2, of course, absolutely 100% support the Louis G. Brown Peace Institute for the request of $100,000, and as well as the revitalization of public parks, green spaces for, I think, is this in your district, obviously. absolutely think that that's so necessary. Like, we need a huge capital investment in Mattapan. We saw that the capital investment this year proposed only $56 million, and then we saw that its counterparts received quadruple or more. I would have even say 10 times more, right? Almost 10 times more. Like, so I think that I agree with those last two. And then I have a question about the YMCA one, and who is developing? Is it YMCA? Tell me, sorry, did I?
Early on, so we're asking for a study to put out there to see what can be done on the site, and then we'll be looking for partners.
Okay. Yeah, I think it sounds great. And I just think that the amount might be a little bit like too much for a study, but I agree with you.
So this is,
idea.
yep, so study and also help them to get, plans, engineering. So a lot of the upfront soft costs as well.
Understood.
Right.
That makes sense now. And then the $8 million, like, such an amazing idea. And not sure what we're gonna do with that in working session, but just wanted to say, like, you are a true innovator, and of course, this is the way that ARPA dollars is supposed to be spent, that we're very specific and intentional about transformation housing. Just really blown away by this idea. Thank you.
I appreciate that, and I do have a budget on the homeownership voucher program, which breaks it down year by year and what's going to be spent to. So I could share that with the council.
Looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
That would be great. Councilor Worrell, if you get that to us, we'll send out things after this for folks to have. That'd be great. Okay. Oh, Councilor Murphy, yes.
So I'm going to also talk about the Y, and I am a member of the Y and my family, and really love this whole proposal and tying it into housing. And you already know this, but maybe want to make sure you add this into your proposal, that they have an amazing early childhood program, an after-school program, and also a summer camp. So make sure you're reminding whoever is making these decisions that not only do they have, all of these, the gym and the pool and the basketball court and the yoga classes and the cooking classes that are so important, especially coming out of COVID, but they also have an amazing daycare, early childhood program, and lots of kids either get bused or walk there from local schools in the afternoon for their after-school program and summer camp. So just giving you a little hint there, because that might help make sure that you secure these needed funds. So thank you for advocating for this.
Thank you for mentioning that, Councilor Murphy. I believe they are partnering with 4 schools with the hub school model.
Yep.
And they're looking to explore to add, or willing to have conversations about with Tech Boston, which is right across the street. But yes, they do a lot of great things at the Dorchester Y.
Yep. Thank you.
Councilor Lujan?
Okay, I don't really have a question it's just a general statement. Sure. Is that okay? I support Councilor Worrell, your ideas. I think that they are great, especially around homeownership, something I care deeply about. So definitely looking forward to learning more from you on that. I also think, this is the first time that we're seeing a lot of these, like what other councils propose, and I think there's a lot of synergy, like at Councilor Coletta and her proposal, the Nazaro Center, which also needs a lot of work, but it's about senior programming, and my proposal is about senior programming as well. So I do think hopefully we'll be able to find some synergy between the proposals. I just also want to, for the sake of transparency, I support working, Councilor Murphy is really spearheaded supporting the Phoenix and the great work that they do. They're creating space for folks. You mentioned that you would think about ways or operationally that we'd be able to support. And I think that there are a number of counselors, and myself included, who want to think about how that partnership looks like. And so once you figure out a model, if you could let us know what that model is so that potentially we also use that model. I'd love to support this effort, but also think about how we can use it for other councils who want to do something similar.
Yeah, so I think specifically the Office of Recovery Services had suggested that like there are a number of partners working in the space and that if they had a kind of like smaller grants program that it would help them with their collaboration with their partners. So that was sort of a follow-up conversation that happened with Jen Tracy and her team because of the feedback on the infrastructure asks. And so I think similar to the idea of kind of having some grants that maybe funnel through food justice, like,
Yeah.
you know, where the sort of, there's a departmental expertise that's kind of like, you know, putting together RFPs and being clear about what's sought and kind of doing oversight, but that, and in that sense, like things aren't guaranteed, which is why it says like places like the, you know, whatever, but that it's sort of a way of saying like, there's a council desire to help this ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's an excellent idea for the Phoenix in partnership with the Office of Recovery Services. That's actually what we're trying to build out too in the Office of Returning Citizens. So I think that is a great model, working in partnership with CBOs and doing grant making there. So just supporting it either formally through ARPA or through the ability of the Office of Recovery Services to be able to engage in grant making, whatever makes the most sense.
Cool. Great. Thank you. Anyone else? Questions for Councilor Worrell? Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna do a very quick run through of Councilor Flynn's items, just so that everybody's kind of heard. And then the ones that have me as first sponsor. One second. So Councilor Flynn's start on page 10, and I'll just be brief, but I think the food support in South Boston one is sort of similar to Gigi's, the dynamic, sorry, Councilor Coletta, the dynamic of we've got a whole food ecosystem that grew up when we had resiliency funds and all these emergency funds, and as that sort of retreats, we're still seeing a lot of food need, and in Councilor Flynn's area in particular, the South Boston Community Health Center actually runs quite a substantial food pantry and is the hub of a lot of that work, so that's sort of mentioned as one of the possible like keystone areas, but I think that idea of focusing on food access, and in particular the qualified census tracts in Councilor Flynn's district are mainly the public housing developments in South Boston, and a lot of them are folks who access the food pantry there in the health center. The capacity study, there is a kind of long abandoned and kind of decrepit half basketball court at the heart of the West Broadway development with some space around it. There's quite good full basketball courts just on the other side of the same building that are used by the youth in the development. But this one's right, like it's not used for anything, has been in its current state for 15 years. And Councilor Flynn was suggesting that the BHA at least look at it to see if it was a place that we could add some veterans housing, because there's a project that happened on a similar kind of relatively small piece of land over in the Mary Ellen McCormick housing development. And so the question of, okay, is this something where we could actually be housing some more people? He wanted them to look at that. But the request is just for funds for a study. And then the Chinatown microgrid project, this is, well, you can read the stuff here. There's a whole collaboration working on sort of the Green Justice Coalition working on a virtual microgrid. And they're trying to kind of come up with more community control over energy, and which both has kind of green goals and also financial independence goals for a lot of the low-income communities of color that are looking to pilot this. And the place they're first looking to pilot it in is Chinatown in Councilor Flynn's district. So those are those three. Back at the start of the packet, I think folks have heard me and Councilor Mejia and Councilor Flynn talk about Tech Goes Home and digital equity a bunch throughout this process, but, and I know there's a lot of digital equity advocates on the council. This was a category that's specifically called out by the American Rescue Plan as an area for spending, but the administration proposal doesn't propose any spending in this. And because of the opportunity to get families signed up for the ACP, which is this affordable connectivity program where basically, you know, we've got many, many households, practically half of the city of Boston, that is eligible for this $30 a month internet benefit. And we have a very small proportion of those people actually signed up so far. And so the goal would be to do a kind of like surge support for Tech Goes Home of getting people signed up and the CBOs informed about how to help their own people, the community-based organizations. And the idea is that when we think about like an ARPA spend, that even if Tech Goes Home surge that work, and then after 2 years that money goes away, we've got tens of thousands more Bostonians that are signed up for affordable internet, and that makes a big difference for access long term. And then Councilor Mejia, if you wanted to say anything on digital equity, otherwise I'll. Good. Just because you're my co-sponsor, so before I jump to the next thing.
Thank you for allowing me to speak again. So I just want to go on the record that I am also a co-sponsor for the food justice. My office did a lot of work during COVID in regards to food access. We've created programs and raised lots of visibility around this issue, so I'm happy to join Councilor Coletta on that. And yes, the same with digital equity. We did a lot of work during COVID, and I'm really excited to continue to work alongside my colleagues to push for further investments in that space. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Councilor Mejia. And then the next one, Councilor Lara and Baker both aren't here, but Councilor Braden, after I go, if you want to say anything about it, I know you're also excited about this, but basically the City of Boston, as everyone knows, is launching this composting pilot. The idea is that it's going to grow over the next few years, and then that eventually we'd be on a path to composting for all, sort of akin to some peer cities that do that. And there's both lots of good reasons to do that from a zero waste goal perspective for the city, and also the state's sort of increasingly requiring it. So like everyone needs to move towards handling organic trash differently. The challenge is that if we don't build some facilities to handle that ourselves, we're gonna end up totally captive to like industry partners. And the thing that we've seen happen in recycling is that recycling started out with them paying us, and then it flipped to us paying them and became like super expensive, and the city's really got no choice because we're stuck with a single stream recycling partner. And so the thought here really is, hey, let's own our own destiny on composting. Let's really be able to build up this infrastructure. We could actually be the city that other cities and towns pay to handle their compost if we did this right, because we're the hub. And it also has the opportunity to create actual compost for like community gardens and parks and stuff all over the city. And so the idea here is basically that we've got our organic waste contracts up again in 3 years, and there's already a study underway to try to figure out like where and what facilities we could place for this in the city. But if we don't have the funds to hand to actually create those composting facilities quickly, then we may again get locked into crummy contracts for an extended period of time. And I know that one of the big interests of Councilor Lara and Baker, my co-sponsors on this, is also really like, let's make this a city managed asset, like city workforce. These are good jobs. Like this is something that it could also be a learning opportunity for our Green Jobs program. Like there's just a lot of opportunities to kind of be a leader in this space, but only if we seize them. The overall cost of building these facilities is probably something like $15 million. And so it's definitely like a capital side ask, like the majority of it. So the $3 million is kind of a plug for the actual pre-development costs that would be spent in the ARPA period, and then assuming that the capital of the like big build for static compost heap infrastructure and digester infrastructure would be something that we'd put on the capital budget, but that it would make a big difference to have the funds to spend now to move quickly on this. Councilor Braden, did you want to say anything on that?
No, I just want to go on record in full support of this. I think it's a very prudent and mindful way to think about the future and how we're going to manage our organic waste, and I think it will be money well spent in the long run. We'll get a good return on our investment. And then also just to skip back to your the digital equity one with the proposal from Tech Goes Home. I think ARPA the American Recovery Act. I think a lot of the intention is to try and repair the damage that happened with COVID. And one of the things that we've really exposed our shortcomings was within the technical space, and digital equity. Increasingly seniors and housebound folks are doing telemedicine, and having access to affordable internet is sort of an important piece of that whole conversation. So I really, really want to go on record as strongly in support of that initiative as well. If we can get some funding to do that, that would be great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you, Councillor Braden. And then the one district thing in here for me is another effort to try again at the Mission Hill Link, which we've just put a bunch of effort into in recent months, redesigning the route so that it will go to Ruggles, and having it connect so that when you're at the T-stops at Ruggles and Roxbury Crossing, it tells you this is where you connect to the link, and creating little bus stops and changing the route also so that more of the mostly seniors and kind of mobility challenged folks who use it can get to the grocery store a little bit faster. It now does basically two loops instead of one super long loop where people had to wait for a long time on the thing. We're pretty excited about it as kind of a model for last mile transit. And overall, it comes in quite affordably. It's supported by the MBTA, the New England Baptist Hospital, and Back of the Hills CDC. And right now it kind of costs about like $140,000 a year to run, but the costs are going up with just everyone raising their rates because of inflation. And also the folks who ride it would really like it to extend a little bit hours-wise. And so the proposal here is basically I'm very actively working to get like institutions and development in the district to sort of support it on an ongoing basis, because we've got more and more housing getting developed and it runs right along a lot of those streets. And so we should have those folks chipping in. But in the immediate term, it's a model that the city's interested in. It is, could this be a solution in Alston, Brighton? Could this be a solution like in the parts of Mattapan that don't connect well to the trolley? Like, could this be like potentially a thing that the city does? That's why there was some excitement about printing like the first city bus stop signs and stuff for it earlier this year. And my main concern is that we not trip over our shoelaces and find it in like a financial panic because of these increased costs, like just right in this moment before I can kind of secure the longer term subsidy to it. So this is obviously, I had proposed the $75,000 in the budget process. This is kind of a $75,000, then surge to 100, then down to 50, with very much the goal of figuring that out on the private side funding wise before the end of ARPA. Yeah, so that's a district proposal. It's also the part of my district that falls in the qualified census tract category. And then the one other thing that we haven't addressed is Councillor Lara's proposal on medallions. This is on page 13, and I'll just speak to it briefly because Councillors Flaherty and Baker are also not here. This is this idea of trying to help the folks, especially the smaller businesses who had taxi medallions issued by the city that had a certain high value, and then when Lyft and Uber moved in and sort of that whole industry went the way that it went, arguably without some of the government regulation that the taxi industry might have expected, saw those medallions drop in value. And so the idea is sort of help those owners to recover some of their losses, either so that you can kind of restart in the taxi industry, or even if you're getting out, not live under the debt. There is a note here, this is something that what the administration flagged about this proposal was that with ARPA funding specifically, the losses that would have to be quantified would be the losses that happened during the pandemic, like since 2020, and the lion's share of the losses on the medallion value market were before that, like they were when Uber and Lyft took off back in 17. Mm-hmm. So this particular framing of the program where we make up for losses, it's not that we couldn't do it, but that it would have to be a source other than ARPA. Or if it was ARPA, it would have to be about the losses experienced because, and of course there was, right, everyone stopped using rideshare, so it's not a completely off the table idea, but it would be constrained by the federal constraints on ARPA. So yeah, so I think with that, somebody's spoken to every proposal in the packet. Did anybody have any questions for me on that, on what I just talked about? Or yeah, go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had asked administration how much of their own proposal would be one-time spending versus how much of it would be costs that we'd want to bake into operating costs in 3 years. Do we have that breakdown, and how will that look compared to our request?
That's a good, so we sort of like gathered that data from people, but we didn't have a chance this afternoon to kind of pull that together into aggregate numbers. So let me work on that tonight.
I'm actually more concerned and more curious about the administration numbers, because that's the bigger sum here. And we don't even know if what we've proposed is actually, you know what I mean? So I'm really curious to see how that breakdown lands for the administration.
And I don't know if Casey, you're prepared to speak to that now, or else you could speak to us tomorrow.
I have it by project, but not summarized, so you can speak on accurate.
Yeah, even if we could get that via email, I think that would be helpful.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilor Fernandez-Anderson and then Councilor Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think I've already asked this through the chair that any organization or department or program that is offering to use ARPA dollars, that there be a report on what demographics it will impact. And I have not received that back yet.
So I think that was a question that we asked of every project, and it is a question I think that we got back in that 82-page packet on every project.
Yeah, like there's no plan, there's no actual understanding of how. Like there's like, oh yeah, this will like impact, people of color, and then, but there's no breakdown in percent, and there's actually no plan. I don't understand, like if you say to me, yeah, I'm gonna spend, this is gonna be racially equity, no one is saying that in any way, but if you're saying this is gonna be equitable, how? You know what I mean? Like, and that, I think, the whole idea of studying something afterwards or evaluating something afterwards, equity, about whether or not it was equitable, I disagree, right? Like, and that's why I said, take the money out of that whole equity study, but that we intentionally are looking at beforehand how the implementation will be racially equitable, because that's the whole point of ARPA. And then the other thing is that, there's an argument about that the city doesn't like to or doesn't want to fund or support, like not support, but that they don't want to get into the habit or set precedence of funding nonprofits. But that's actually not true, is it? Because then if we did a study to look at what nonprofits the city has actually supported, like the CDCs, like, I don't know, I'm not going to mention any, but there are so many nonprofits that we actually support. And then I wonder if we could do a study as well to figure out how many of those nonprofits were white-led. And then that is where the discrepancy is. That, no, it's not that we don't support nonprofits, it's that we support the really large ones that are white top-heavy. And I think there is the issue. There's a discrepancy of it not being racially equitable. And so this body, white or black, is proposing to support nonprofits by way of ecosystems or other projects or housing. And we are being intentional in the transformation of racial equity. And I've seen that from everyone. So I think moving forward, hopefully in the working session, I don't know if there's room for that, but looking at which population is it gonna impact? Because if we're looking at the criteria of ARPA spending, that's what we should do. As well as what are the metrics or plan to ensure that it's racially equitably implemented, and then that in the future we should look at, we should definitely not go for nonprofits cannot be supported financially by the city, and then in the future we should look at a study of all the nonprofits that gets money from the city, and then who owns them and who runs them and who's benefiting from them. And I think in that point, then we can actually, like, if we have all of the data or the research on the table, we can sincerely and genuinely say whether or not we do support nonprofits, and do we need to change that because we're putting money toward big nonprofits that are white top heavy to support Black people, but we still have all of these problems, all of these, inequities in Black communities. So what are we doing here? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Fernandez-Anderson.
Can I support your mission link proposal?
Thank you. Yes, half of the route is in District 7. Councilor Murphy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure, I know I say it every time, but I haven't yet at this hearing, that I am in support of Councilor Baker's Boys and Girls Clubhouse and all of the things each of us individually keep bringing up. Just check off every box here. And the BPS students that will be the closest to use this space are in an underperforming, the Deborah McCormick has been in state receivership, taken over, almost closed. And the students there would be having 100% access during the school day, which I think is sometimes missed on the public and others, knowing that during the day, our BPS students would have full access, and the residents in that area that could use this space, this state-of-the-art facility that all neighborhoods deserve, especially this neighborhood, would be necessary. So I just want to make sure I'm on record of supporting that today, as always. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Councilor Murphy. Are there any, sorry, I need to look over better here, sorry, guys. Councilor Mejia and then Councilor Coletta.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to say thank you so very much for this weekend and the amount of time and energy you spent helping me figure out some things. You really didn't have to, but really do appreciate you helping me think through and to present things in a way that the administration could understand it. So thank you for being my translator. The fact that I even need one is embarrassing, but that means that the administration has to do a better job at understanding people from diverse learning experiences. But anyways, that's not what I'm here to talk about. I wanted to just, to Councilor Anderson's point in terms of accountability, I'm just curious, as we continue to go through this conversation, what levers do we have? Because once we approve this, the money's out the door, and then what? We're going to be ultimately responsible for what we approve. And I need to be able to figure out how we're going to put some parameters in place where there's some level of accountability that happens, or at least some information sharing, Casey, that, through the council, that we're able to continue to check to see how these dollars are being earmarked, what's working and what's not. I just think that there is an opportunity for us to think about that as we continue to move forward. It'll make me feel more comfortable and confident in approving anything if I know that I'm going to have some sort of system in place. We have a new committee, a government accountability, transparency, and accessibility, where we look at post-audit. And while ARPA dollars might be different than the budget, I do believe that we have a fiscal responsibility in making sure that we're creating some sort of system to do some checks and balances and figure out and revisit. So I just want to make sure that there's, to the chair, I'd like to know what the vision is for us to being able to do that within a committee that looks at pause. Maybe we said we were going to do X, Y, and Z, but it doesn't look like we're going to achieve that. So I'm just curious about what, if any, opportunities, what are we thinking, if anything, and have we thought about it? Because that is, for me, where I feel the biggest opportunity for us to hold ourselves accountable to these dollars lies in building the infrastructure for that. And so I just want to name that as something that I'm going to be looking at through the post-audit committee and working in partnership with folks who are interested in doing that work, because otherwise we're just signing away these checks. And then to Councilor Baker's point, what do we have to show for it at some point? I'd like to see some return on that investment, but I don't want to wait until the end of the 3 years to say, oh my God, we didn't do anything for X amount of da-da-da. So I'd like to be able to put that on the record, that is something that definitely I'm going to be leaning into and creating a space for us to figure out what's working and what's not, and how would we redirect the conversation to ensure that we hit those goals. So, Chair, I'm just curious about what your vision is for that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mejia. A couple of things. One is, would love to work with you in the post-audit committee, the government title, accountability, transparency,
and accessibility.
And accessibility committee. Because, yeah, I think it's really important that we do that. I will say that and I'll send it around to the council, the dashboard that we have specifically on the ARPA authorized funds is, I think, probably the most detailed one that is online about any of the city spending, and it's because they have to report so much to the feds about it, so they put it all up online. And I've appreciated using it. If you click on various things, it'll tell you actually the question we were asking, for instance, in the hearing of how much of the AOP money is spent, obligated, free. That's actually being live tracked on this. So I think we've got some good data at our fingertips, and then, as you know, the trick is always making sense of the data and what it actually is telling you. And I think that clearly ARPA should be a sort of model from an oversight perspective, right? And something that the council doesn't just forget about when we authorize it. I do think that we have to authorize the funds. I think that especially with housing, having come from that world, there is a extended timeline, and December 2024 will be here before everybody knows it. So, but I think the way to balance those two things is to have robust oversight, and happy to work together on that.
Thank you for that. And I just wanted to just be clear about the process, is that technically our jobs with just this process here, let's say for instance there's 13 of us, do all 13, what's the pathway towards victory for ARPA funding? If we all are no or yes, can you talk to me just about the process?
Well, I think that fundamentally it's an appropriation. It requires a majority vote of the council, right, which is 7. It's certainly my interest as the chair that all councilors feel they can see their fingerprints in the ARPA deal, and it's not just a question of 7 and then something goes, right? But that's at a basic level, this is an appropriation vote like the ones we take on much smaller grants.
But you still need 7, right?
Yes.
Okay. So that's it. I'm happy to know that. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Any further? Oh, Councillor Coletta, I'm sorry.
I know. I'm sorry. I forgot to mention my fallen proposals. So another moment of silence for my things. So and thank you to Councillor Flaherty, Murphy, and Louis Jen for trying to co-sponsor this Clarity Pool Amendment. I was told it fits the capital budget. Charlestown, I'm trying. We're getting there. O'Donnell Elementary School Playground, I would argue it's a census tract qualifier, and I'm still waiting on that from the administration and would still love that investment in that playground. I also had a public art project called North End Through the Generations, and was told that this was more of a summer grants proposal. I will go through that process. However, I do think that it does qualify under the arts and culture for ARPA, bringing folks outside and convening community, but that's okay, I'll let that one go. And then Turn It Around as well. This is an incredible organization through the Charlestown Coalition that invests in our youth and provides mentorship opportunities. And with the uptick of youth violence in Charlestown, having an expanded personnel and programming in this organization was important to me. And so I was hoping that ARPA would go towards that organization. But just wanted to say all of that on the record, and then just, again, thank you, Madam Chair, for walking me through this already. I just wanted to say it on the floor. So thank you in allowing me to do that.
Thank you so much, Councillor Coletta. And Councillor Braden just stepped out, but similarly, we discussed the McKinney Playground, which she got funding, budget funding for last year. And actually, it already has been topped up on capital funding for this year. And the challenge that we're facing there is a project management prioritization challenge, which I think is the challenge we're facing on a number of these. So I hear you, and I'm happy to continue amplifying. I think, yeah, there's a bunch of things where I think the council has sort of capital budget impatience, and so then it's like, can we move it to ARPA? But if in fact the same department would be managing it, it's sort of stuck in the same queue, and so that's sort of part of the conversation. Councillor Louis-Jean?
I just wanted to express support for my councillor colleague, Councillor Coletta, on her efforts with the Clarity Pool in Charleston. I know a lot of residents have reached out to me, and I was, hoping to see that go through. Again, if there's an attempt to reconsider, I think that this could be a good use of ARPA funds. We know that it's an issue for a lot of our BCYF centers and access to swimming pools, so just want to go on the record in support of that request as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Councillor Louis-Jean. Councillor Baker?
Can I ask a procedure question,
Sure.
Madam Chair?
Sure.
So like, if we're going through these, what would be amendments to the mayor's proposals, like how does this move forward? Do we see a document or like, and when are you planning on a vote? Is there an opportunity to maybe split this up into a housing vote, as best we can, so we can maybe re-examine a little more and just, instead of sending the 350 through. So there's a couple things here, like when do you plan on a vote? Like how are we gonna see the workings from this working session and tomorrow? And is that what we'll be voting on with changes? Just some clarification, and if you wanna think about it and
Yeah, I think what I would say is I don't really want to prejudge the tomorrow conversation. So I think what I'd rather do is say, like, my hope for tomorrow is that we're talking about, like, I think it's hard to learn about something for the first time and then immediately start talking about trade-offs on it. So that's why today we just talked about everybody's proposals so that people could kind of process that. But my hope is that tomorrow we can kind of talk about, and also like, right, transparently, this is something where we have to get to agreement that both the council and the mayor's side is going to approve, right? And so I think that my goal tomorrow is to sort of say, okay, well, how does all this look? What if we pull it together this way? Hear people's reactions, et cetera. And then the question about where we land, like voting timeline wise, I feel like depends a lot on how much agreement there is. So I don't really want to.
So we don't need to vote on this week or next week or anything like that. Well, I mean, you probably have a timeline that you want to stay within, but it isn't this Wednesday.
So I think there's a couple of like different dynamics pulling on the timing. So I've certainly heard from some colleagues who feel like there are things that they want to kind of like know are in ARPA when they're like voting on the budget. So I know that for some people, like at least having a feel for that is connected. And that is transparently part of the reason why we've sort of like accelerated this conversation in recent days, is to help people not feel like, because I think a lot of us felt like the fact that BPS finally got back to us on what they were thinking about doing with ESSER after the BPS vote had gone through is like a frustration, right? And so trying to help like those things be somewhat connected, and they've also been connected in the sense that because the administration proposed both at once, there have been times in the hearings where they've been saying at budget, oh yeah, we're doing that, but it's actually on ARPA, right? And so I think letting counselors feel like they've got a decent sense of the whole picture is important. And if everybody, like, tomorrow kind of gets to a place, like I think there's a world in which it could move on Wednesday. I think that obviously want to do this right. Also, I am hearing like, the housing folks in particular, there's definitely a desire to get the money on the street. There's also a desire to be able to put some of the money out in the, if I can just finish, in the RFP. There's a annual MOH RFP that goes out in mid-July, and from a procedural perspective, it would be easier for them if some of it could be offered in that context.
It's
So-
also the largest pot of money, though, and one that we should really, and for me, again, where are the units? Show me where you're building units. I'm all about the investment, but I still don't see anything coming out of this as far as units being built, and we're gonna connect on, I've been through this spiel already. I don't need to say it again, but, you know, that's the biggest pot right there, but we're gonna have the most pressure to not dig into that and just get out in the street. So there's a little bit of unsurety for me, because I would like to see where we're building units. And I'm totally uncomfortable with the amount of money that we're sending into the low bar housing, with not a single unit being sober living. Because I think that's just throwing like gas on the fire there. So thank you. If we could split this up, I think that would make it easier
Thank you.
to get some money through. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Councilor Worrell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just had a few quick questions. Do we have a total amount of how much the city council, our proposals are? And then do we have that like broken down by housing, by category?
Not yet. I have like that Excel sheet sort of half made, and if I had like a couple more hours, it might have been a cover sheet to this sheet, but.
So tomorrow?
But tomorrow, I think I can give you
Perfect.
that sense. And I think also it's important, and I flagged this earlier in the conversation, I think it's important like to note there's an obvious, like, it's trickier to do things where there's an absolute trade-off where we're taking money away from an administration proposal and moving it to a council one, something, like, as opposed to places where there are synergies between what the council wants to do and and the categories that the mayor had proposed. So I also think that it's not just about the categories of spending, it's also a little bit about like how much are we pulling out of kind of these proposed pots and where are we finding those things, and that's kind of also a category difference.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilor Mejia?
Yes, I just have one more question. And I do appreciate Councilor Baker's question because every time he asks a question, it makes me think of something else that I need to get some clarity on. So thank you for that. I'm just curious because I know there's a lot of, going back and forth and everybody's trying to get all these budgets approved. I'm deeply concerned and worried about these processes without knowing kind of like where we're landing, with the mayor's, the budget that the vote that we have to take on the 29th, the uncertainty of our advocacy in this space. And that's a lot to ask people who already don't trust government, me included. Even though I work in it, I still don't trust it. So I need some sense of like, where are we landing with this? If we're gonna be putting allegedly all these things on the line, then only to just be, after the budget vote on the 29th, it'd be a whole different conversation. So I need some assurances, or at least some sort of understanding about all of the politics that are at play, because I'm not into playing chess. I don't do well under these like political negotiations, so I just need some transparency and understanding about what is happening and where are we going on the 29th, because I know all of this is, my interpretation of all of this was that we were trying to figure out how we can get to a place where we can support or not support, or at least understand what's at play. But if all of this is just in the sense of just another exercise, then I need to know what's at play.
Yeah, Councilor Mejia would not say it's an exercise. I think that, that's what I was trying to allude to in the answer to Councilor Baker's question. I think that there is currently that tension between the question of kind of making sure that council priorities get into the ARPA and having that be a thing that people know when they cast their budget vote, which involves reaching an agreement on ARPA at an accelerated pace versus the desire to stretch out longer the review process for ARPA, right? And I think there are colleagues who feel both ways about that, right? I mean, certainly, like, as chair, I would love to get to a place where counselors felt like, yeah, we see ourselves in this proposal and we feel comfortable like supporting something, and everyone doesn't have that like question hanging over them vis-a-vis budget. So that's like that's what I'm trying to do. And I think that I think things, you know, we should have something really clear on the table by the working session tomorrow, so that you don't feel like you're walking in on Wednesday without knowing the answer to that.
Yeah, and I think because this is a new administration, the hope is that, you know, we're all coming here with the best intentions, right? Because I've been here before. This is my third budget. I know how you all work or don't. So I am giving you all the benefit of the doubt. But
She's not talking to you.
I'm talking about the administration.
Behind you.
I'm talking about the people who are behind you, Frank. No. I'm talking about the administration in particular, because we've negotiated certain things during our budget process, and a lot of those things came out empty-handed, right? So I feel like this is a trust-building exercise, and I know, I'm sorry to call it an exercise, Councilor Bach, I wasn't referring to your process, I was just talking about in general. This is a trust-building exercise, right? And I feel like for me, I'm at a place where this year, I'm observing. And I'm learning who's who and how y'all are showing up into this space, because that's gonna set me up for success year 2. So I'm not feeling that I'm gonna lose either way, because I'm gonna learn a lot about everybody here, including my colleagues, about how y'all are showing up in this world. So I'm good with that. That learning alone is just priceless. So I just wanna go on the record saying that this is good observation to see who's who and how y'all are showing up. But I am a little bit nervous about the politics at play. I just want to name that.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Any further comments? Anyone else who wanted to testify? Megan, we don't have any. Okay, no further public testimony. All right, well, in that case, we'll be back at 1 o'clock tomorrow. We'll be in the Piemonte room. It's a working session. And I am gonna get pizza. So that's just an FYI to the assembled people. I am not taking 13 special orders for pizza. It will be, okay, good to know. You mean you don't eat dairy at all? Or okay, got it. And we also have Kendra. Would you eat vegan pizza, or would you not do that? Yeah, I'll take okay, all right, cool. Because Kendra is also vegan, so I was gonna get something. Anyways, all right, sorry. This is all technically still on the record. With that, this hearing of the Boston City Council's Committee on Boston's COVID-19 Recovery is adjourned. Thank you all.